Hello everyone, welcome back to Age of Nagash, which is a channel dedicated to Age of Sigmar. In this video, I'm going to tell you about my thoughts after using Deathrattle in the new Legions of Nagash battle tome. So I'm going to go through each of their units, and then I'm going to show you a quick 2000 point list I came up with, and how I think that could be quite effective in the game. So we're going to start off with Skeleton Warriors. Now these are fundamentally the same as what they were before this battle tome. And I've talked about the changes before, but we'll go over them again since we're talking about Deathrattle in this video. So, they've got a 4-inch movement, a 6+ save, bravery 10 and 1 wound. They have 2 choices for their melee weapons, so the unit can either have Ancient Blade, which is a 1-inch range, 1 attack, force to hit, force to wound, no rend, 1 damage, or they can have an Ancient Spear, which is 2-inch range, 1 attack, 5 to hit, force to wound, no rend, 1 damage. So clearly the trade-off there is the first one, the blade, has got a better to hit characteristic. However, if you've got a big block of skeletons, which you will do, there's going to be less that will be able to attack. However, if you gave them the ancient spear, yes, on base they're hitting on a 5. However, you would just be able to get that many more attacks in. So it's just a versus. What's better to have, a better to hit or a more attacks? And I do think more attacks generally. So Ancient Spear is my preferred favourite for big units. If you have to take a unit of 10, always go with the blade, just because they'll all be able to attack anyway. So, description: a unit of Skeleton Warriors has 10 or more models. Some units are equipped with Ancient Blades, whilst others go to war with Ancient Spears. Units of Skeleton Warriors also carried battered Crypt shields for protection. So, Skeleton Champion. The leader of this unit is Skeleton Champion. Add 1 to the attack characteristics of a Skeleton Champion's Ancient Blade or Ancient Spear. So standard, what we usually see for most death, they just get a extra attack. And then the standard barrier. So models in this unit may be standard barrier. Subtract 1 from bravery characteristics of enemy units whilst they're within 6 inches of any death standard bearers. Okay, so this was the big thing about how skeletons and how generally all of Deathrattle has changed is the banners are no longer bringing back the models. However, after playing quite a few games, I don't care, to be honest, because you're bringing so many more models back anyway than you ever were before, even when the banner was doing, like bringing D6 back for Skeleton Warriors. Now you're bringing back even more than that, even without being able to use the banner. So yeah, and it's a good standard ability, making the enemy -2 to their bravery, especially in a death army where you have abilities that can cause damage to the enemy depending on how low their bravery is. So that's good, and it's within 6 inches of any death standard bearers. So this isn't, I've got one of the unit there, by if you're within 6 inches of the unit, you're -1 to bravery. You have to be within 6 inches of that model. So I always, if I've got like a block of 40 skeletons, I will have 4 banners in there, just to maximise it. Have 1 in the middle and then like maybe the rest like on the corners, just to really spread out their radius. It won't stack, but like I say, you want to get as many enemy units affected by it as possible. Then the Hornblower. Models in this unit may be Hornblowers. A unit that includes any Hornblowers can always move up to 6 inches when it charges, unless the charge roll is higher. So I've talked about this before. I think it's really good. Being able to just guarantee a 6-inch charge is brilliant. So moving on to the abilities. Serve in Death. Add 1 to the hit rolls for Skeleton Warriors units that are within 18 inches of any friendly death heroes. So you do get accustomed to this and you do get used to it, and you sort of take it for granted. But it is, again, a good ability, because that means that your Ancient Spears, which were hitting on 5s, and I said take the Ancient Spear just to get more attacks on, but hitting on 5s is not so good. Now, with this ability, you're hitting on 4s, so you'll be getting so many attacks hitting on 4s, it's just brilliant. And then Skeleton Legion. So add 1 to attack characteristics of this unit's melee weapons if it has 20 or more models. Add 2 instead if the unit has 30 or more models. Okay, so this is why I'm saying you get loads of attacks, because with skeletons you're going to take them in big units to get the most out of this. It's Skeleton Legion. So you'll be making 3 attacks each with each skeleton. Say you've got a unit of 40 spears. It's not uncommon for you to get, let's say, 30 of them attacking. That can actually be done with not too much difficulty. And then they're making 3 attacks each, so that's 90 attacks. And then if you want to put Van Hel's Stance Macabre on them, which is a spell by the Necromancer, now they're making 180 attacks in 1 combat phase, which is not bad really, is it? It's pretty good. So then we're moving on to Crypt Shields. So add 1 to save rolls for this unit carrying Crypt Shields against attacks that have a rend characteristics of nil. So I've talked about this before, so I say, if you send this up against your enemy basic units, they're just battle line really. They generally won't have rend, so you will make use of this ability. However, if your enemy just wants to clear your skeletons off the board as quick as they can, they will send a rend at them, which will mean that you will generally not get a save. So, but it's a cheap unit that you're going to keep regenerating the models anyway, and you get a death save if you're within 6 inches of your of a death hero anyway. So they're always generally going to have a 6 up save. So not bad there. So that's the Skeleton Warriors. They also have keywords, so the keywords are Death, Skeleton, Deathrattle, Summonable, Skeleton Warriors, so they're summonable, so they can be summoned through grave sites. I've talked about grave sites a lot in my other videos, so I'm sure you know what they do by now. If you don't, go back to my videos where I talked about each of the legions and the Grand Host Nagash, and you'll hear plenty about it there. So, like I say, that's the Skeleton Warriors. I have talked about them more in detail before. However, I just want to quickly go over them just to, like re-jog your memory in case you haven't looked at the War Scroll for a while. In the Legions of Nagash, they're still very good. There's ways for them to have even more attacks now, so they're still useful, and they're even more grindy now. They're even more durable just because of how many models you can bring back. Yeah, sure, you won't be able to bring back an automatic D6 in your hero phase, but now you generally get to bring back much more than that anyway. So yeah, really, really good. So, moving on from the Skeleton Warriors, we have their bigger brothers, this being the Graveguard. Now, Graveguard in Legions of Nagash are possibly my favourite winners out of the whole Battle Tome. I think they've just got so much better. I'll tell you why. So we'll quickly read through their, their War Scroll, and then I'll tell you my personal reason why I think they're so good. So we've got a 4-inch movement, we've got 5+ save, bravery 10, 1 wound. We have 2 choices of melee weapons. So we've got the Wight Blade, 1-inch range, 2 attacks, 3 to hit, 4 to wound, -1 rend, 1 damage. The Great Wight Blade, 1-inch range, 2 attacks, 3 to hit, 3 to wound, -1 rend, 1 damage. And then the description: a unit of Graveguard has 5 or more models. Some units of Graveguard are equipped with Wight Blades and Crypt Shields, others are instead equipped with 2-handed Great Wight Blades. And then the Standard Bearer. So models in this unit may be Standard Bearers. Subtract 1 from the bravery characteristic of enemy units whilst they are within 6 inches of any Death Standard Bearers. Okay, so I've talked about Death Standard Bearers a lot. I've just literally talked about them, the Skeleton Warriors. I think they are really good. No one should complain about them because they're generally a better ability than what most Standard Bearers give, and put as many in your unit to affect the enemy as much as possible. Okay, and then on to the Champion, which I can't pronounce the name, so I'll just call him the Champion. The leader of this unit is gonna give it a try. The Sensual, we'll go with that. Add 1 to attack characteristics of the Sensual's Wight Blades or Great Wight Blades. And then the Hornblower. So models in this unit may be Hornblowers. A unit that includes any Hornblowers can always move up to 6 inches when it charges, unless the charge rolls higher. So I've just talked about this. The Hornblower is really, really good. Being able to just guaranteed, anything up to a 6-inch charge is amazing. And then the abilities: Cursed Weapons. If the wound roll for an attack made with a Wight Blade or Great Wight Blade is a 6+, double the damage characteristic of that attack. Okay, so this is generally really good. It's what made the Graveguard the sort of the sledgehammer of the Deathrattle. Well, I say sledgehammer, I mean that's probably an over-glorified way of saying it. That's what made the Graveguard capable of dealing with enemy elite units, shall we say. With its -1 rend and its potential getting 2 damage on 6s to wound is particularly good. Okay, and then we move on to Crypt Shields. So add 1 to save rolls for a unit carrying Crypt Shields against attack characteristics that have a rend of dash. So, which means none, and this is the same for Skeleton Warriors. It's the same for most things in the Deathrattle army. So it's a generic thing. You might get it with the Graveguard because you'll be sending them up against the more elite units that the enemy has. Don't be surprised if you don't get it and the enemy has -1 rend. If they do, at worst you have a 6-up save if they have -1 rend. So, and then you also get the death save on top, so not too bad. So going back looking at their melee weapons, so the Wight blade, which essentially allows you to carry a shield, I think is better than the Great Wight blade, because with the shield, you know, if the enemy has no rend, you've got a 4-up save, and then the advantage with the Great Wight blade, it just means that you're wounded on a 3 rather than a 4, so it's easier to wound. I much prefer having the shield just to make these guys even more durable than they are. You know, if something's good at something, make it exceptional at it. Don't try and make the Graveguard, which, you know, like I said, they can do with elite enemy units, but they're more of a survivable unit. Just enhance their survivability rather than just trying to focus all on their killing effectiveness. Now, you're going to hear me talk about being able to buff them to make them as killy as possible, but I'm still giving them the shields just to make them as durable as possible anyway. Right, so that's why I think the Wight blade is better. Now, the reason I really like the Graveguard, and I think they're big winners, is because in the Legions of Nagash, how returning models come back to life works just as easy for Graveguard as it does Skeleton Warriors. So you're bringing just as many Graveguard back as you could potentially bring back Skeleton Warriors, and Graveguard are double the point costs, so that will give you a rough idea how much better they are. Attacks that, they do different jumps, but I think Graveguard a lot better. Now, and then there are ways in the new Legions of Nagash Battle Tome, like Graveguard have 2 attacks standard. However, in a game I made them have 4 attacks, and I had a unit of, in that game it was a unit of 20, and there was a point where only 10 managed to get into combat. However, because they're making 4 attacks each and one of them was a champion, I made 41 attacks, and they killed the Magmadroth they were fighting, and because they had Manhail's Dance Macabre, they got to pile an attack again and then kill some Berserkers in that one combat phase, which just made them insane. And I think I got quite lucky and I got quite a few 6s to wound, so they're doing double damage as well, which is just stacking so many attacks on these guys, just makes them so good. And then in the Grand Host and the Gash Allegiance, their battle line, which is just really encouraging you to take these guys. So we look at how they've got better. You can bring probably about 3 times as many back in a hero phase as you could before, potentially more. You can give them double the attacks that they have written down on their profile, and their battle line for the Grand Host and the Gash. I don't know really what else to say. And, the standard now makes the enemy -1 to their bravery. So, I think these guys are really, really good. They're, like I say, they're potentially my favourite winner from the Legions of the Nagash Battle Tome, and I just think that from the games I've had so far, I've had 3 games so far with Graveguard, and they have not disappointed me. When I say 3 games, it means 3 games since the Battle Tome came out. Like I said, they haven't disappointed me at all. They've, surprised me just how good they can be. So that's the Graveguard. I should say they've also got Death, Skeleton, Deathrattle, Summonable, Graveguard, so the important thing there being summonable, so they can come up from grave sites, and obviously they can regenerate models. Yeah, they're really, really good. Really happy with them. So now we move on to the cavalry of the Deathrattle, and that being the Black Knights. So they have a 12-inch movement, they have a 5+ save, bravery 10 and 2 wounds. They have 2 melee weapons, so you've got the Barrow Lance, 1-inch range, 2 attacks, 3 to hit, 4 to wound, no rend and 1 damage. Then we have the Skeletal, Steeds, Hoods and Teeths, 1-inch range, 2 attacks, 4 to hit, 5 to wound, no rend and 1 damage. And then the description: a unit of Black Knights has 5 or more models. Black Knights are armed with barrel lances and carry crypt shields. They ride skeletal steeds that lash out at the enemy with their hooves and teeth. The Hell Knight, the leader of this unit, is a Hell Knight. Add 1 to the attack characteristics of a Hell Knight's barrel lance. And then the Standard Bearer, so models in this unit may be Standard Bearers. Subtract 1 from the bravery characteristics of enemy units that are within 6 inches of any Death Standard Bearers. So again, I've talked about this before. I think this is really good. It's not, at first it seemed, not so good because Black Knights on a whole now won't be coming back just as much as they were before. Probably on most cases, that's true. However, you can still regenerate models for them, and you're making the enemy -1 to their bravery. So I still like that, and I think it's good. Now we're looking at the Hornblower. So models in this unit may be Hornblowers. A unit that includes any Hornblowers can always move up to 6 inches when it charges, unless the charge roll is higher. So I talked about this before. Really good being able to guarantee up to a 6-inch charge. Then its abilities, Deathly Charge. If this unit completes a charge this turn, add 1 to its wound rolls and add 1 to its damage characteristic for its Barrow Lance. So this is good, especially how you're guaranteeing up to a 6-inch charge. And then the Crypt Shield, you can add 1 to save rolls for this unit against attacks that have a rend of dash, so meaning none. And that's the same as the Crypt Shields we've looked at all the previous units, so it's pretty good, if the enemy doesn't have any rend. So, looking at the Black Knights and how they've changed. So, they used to only have a 1 attack with the Barrow Lance, hitting on a 4, wounding on a 4, no rend and 1 damage. But now they've got 2 attacks, and the hit on a 3 just makes them so much more better. Just that, what might seem like a little change, just makes this unit so much more punchy, and they can actually be what they're meant to be. They're meant to be the shock cavalry to damage the enemy. And I've witnessed this myself. I had a game on Friday against a Bone Splitters army, and when I charged these guys into some Arrow Boys, because it was a Cunning Rock battalion and I had enough with these Arrow Boys continuously shooting me, so I charged my 10 Black Knights into them. Did really well. I managed to kill how many did I kill? I think I'm killing about 10 Arrow Boys, something like that. Bear in mind each one of those has 2 wounds, so I managed to do 20 damage with these guys against them. And Arrow Boys, they don't have the best save. If they've got a 6-up save, I believe, you haven't got any rend, and then they get their extra 6-up like Warpaint save, I believe that's how it works. And I still managed to do 20 damage with Black Knights on the charge, what is pretty much unheard of before this update. So that was really good. And when I moved to get in range to make my charge roll for the to get into the Arrow Boys, again I was like 4 inches away from them, so I was guaranteed that charge anyway. And just made these guys so good on the charge. Now we look at the heroes being the Wight Kings, and we're going to start with the not so good one first. So that is the Wight King with Baleful Tombblade. So he's got a 4-inch movement, he's got a 3+ save, 10 bravery, 5 wounds. The best thing there being a 3+ save, which isn't bad. That is really, really good, especially for death. So he's got 2 melee weapons. So the Baleful Tombblade. Now he's got a 1-inch range. He's got 4 attacks, 3 to hit, 3 to wound, -1 rend, 1 damage. So very flat and not really doing anything there. And then he's got the Skeletal Steed's Hooves and Teeth. Now it's got a 1-inch range. 2 attacks, 4 to hit, 5 to wound, no rend, 1 damage, so not particularly good. However, it's extra attacks. Now with the Skeletal Steed, it says some Wight Kings are mounted on a Skeletal Steed. They have a move of 12 inches rather than 4 inches and can attack with the Steed's Hooves and Teeth. So I've talked about this before. You don't pay anything extra to give him a Skeletal Steed, so what you're just going to have to do is do up some converting, make your Wight King on a Skeletal Steed. Many people have done this before and some really nice results. You can just buy the Skeletal Steed from the Games Workshop website, but I personally feel like that model is very dated, so I would convert a model definitely. So, and then moving on to his abilities. So Beheading Strike, if the wound roll for an attack made with a Baleful Tombblade is a 6+, that attack has a damage characteristic of D3, so making 4 attacks and potentially doing D3 damage each sounds really good. However, it's on a 6 to wound, so you might get 1 maybe if you're lucky, and then that's it. I mean, I just wouldn't rely on this guy to do a lot of damage in combat, quite frankly. And then we have Deathly Invocation. So at the start of your hero phase, pick up to 2 different friendly summonable units within 6 inches of this model. You can heal D3 wounds that have been allocated to each unit you have picked. Roll separately for each unit. If no wounds are currently allocated to a unit you have picked, you may instead return a number of slain models to it that have a combined wounds characteristic equal to or less than a roll of D3. So, yeah, I mean, we've talked about what Deathly Invocation does before, and a Wight King being able to pick 2 different units. I mean, within 6 inches, I think he's joint worse with the Necromancer, but he's still bringing back models, you know, so he is, you know, that ability is essential in your army. And then command ability, so Lord of Bones. If this model uses this ability, pick a friendly Deathrattle unit within 18 inches of it. Until your next hero phase, add 1 to the attack characteristics of that unit's melee weapons. So, this is really, really good. Only works on Deathrattle, so you know that's the caveat there. However, your Graveguard, like I said, they're only making 2 attacks. With this, they're making 3 attacks, and then there's a command tray out there that can make 4 attacks. This is how you stack that up and do really well. I mean, if you're talking about, if you're not so bothered about Graveguard and you just want your skeletons, you know, you've got a unit of 40 of them that are making 3 attacks. With this, they're making 4 attacks each, and then with this command trait that we'll get to later, they'll make 5 attacks each, which is just insane. So, yeah, good command ability. Obviously, if you haven't got a lot of Deathrattle in your army, there'd be no reason to make this guy a general. I mean, in most cases, there's not much of a reason to make this guy a general. However, if you are going Deathrattle heavy, he can be quite good. And just a little note on that command trait as well, Lord of Bones, if you want to put it on the Black Knights, they're making 3 attacks with their Steeds, Hooves and Teeth, and 3 attacks on their Lance and on the charge. That could potentially be devastating depending on what you're up against. You're up against something with a 6-up save, that could be very nasty indeed. So, we're looking at a better Wight King. So, Wight King with Black Axe. He has 4-inch movement, 4+ save, 10 bravery, 5 wounds. He only has 1 melee weapon, the Black Axe, 1-inch range, 4 attacks, freeze the hit, freeze the wound, -1 rend, and 1 damage. And then we have the description. A Wight King is a single model bearing a Black Axe and wearing a heavy suit of barrel armour. And his abilities, Black Axe. If a model is allocated any wounds from attacks made using the Black Axe but is not slain, roll a dice after the Wight King has finished making all of its attacks. On a 6+, that model is slain. Now, so at first, just looking at 4 attacks, freeze, -1 rend, 1 damage, doesn't sound amazing. You know, to be honest, it's worse than the other Wight King because you're not getting the Steed, skeletal, you know, Hooves and Teeth attack. However, this guy being able to make something just disappear on a 6-up. So, and the good thing about this is technically, now this is how I read it, so if you see it differently, let me know in the comments because I definitely want to hear how you interpret this. But if a model is allocated any wounds from attacks using the Black Axe but is not slain, so allocating a wound on an enemy unit is, so you allocate wounds to an enemy unit and then the enemy makes save rolls to try and save against them. And you know, if you play against Stormcast a lot, like I certainly do, they usually make all the saves, hooray, and then no damage. However, if you allocate a wound to, let's say, I don't know, a Star Drake, and then with its 2-up save, rerolling ones, you know, maybe potentially a 3-up save because you've got -1 rend. You know, think about that for a moment, and then it saves it. You know, whatever. But because you've allocated that wound to it and then it made a save roll, you're still going to be able to roll a dice at the end. After it's made its attacks, and on a 6 it will disappear. You don't have to, the enemy doesn't have to fail the save for you to make the 6-up roll, which I thought was really interesting. That's how I've interpreted it. If you've seen it differently and you think, no, the enemy has to fail the save for it to work, let me know in the comments. Like I say, I'm really interested to hear. But I see this as being really good because the enemy doesn't even have to fail their save. You can just do it on a 6-up and, you know, they go bye-bye. And especially if you've got 4 attacks, so I don't know. I mean, if this guy was for some reason surrounded by monsters and for some reason was not eaten already, which, you know, might happen in 1 in every, 200 games, I'm not too sure. However, if that is the scenario, when this guy goes to attack, he's got 4 attacks, he can put each one of those on each one of the enemy monsters, and if he was really lucky and managed to wound all of them, Doesn't matter if the enemy managed to save it or not, you'll still be able to roll a dice for each of them, and on a 6-up, they go bye-bye. Now, like I say, this isn't, that is like, you try and get your Wight King in that scenario, he's going to die. However, if, something like that happened, and, the enemy attacks something else because you had a nasty unit nearby, and, just the perfect storm, how funny would it be if you managed to get 4 6s and wiped out, 4 of the enemy monsters, because you split your attacks? I don't know what the chances of that are. Like 1 in 500 or something, of that perfect storm scenario happening. However, if you do manage to do it, just fucking brilliant, to be honest. That's fantastic. So the Black Axe, I think it could be a load of fun. Don't rely on it in any ways. Stretch your imagination. Don't rely upon it. But it could be a really nice thing and could swing the game. Could be really fun. Okay, so that's the Black Axe. That's why I really like this guy. And then the second reason I like him is because the Burrow Armour. Half the number of wounds allocated to this model from each attack and rounding up. The remainder are negated. So this guy just makes him much more survivable. He's only got a 4+ save compared to the 3+ save on the other Wight King. However, he's half an all damage done to him. Now this could be, if there's 2 1 damage attacks done to him, he will half the damage on that because that's what his ability says. It's not like the Stonehorn that got edited to make his... The Stonehorn basically can't half 1 damage attacks. This guy can. So he can do that, and if the enemy chucks 4 damage at you or something like that, you're halving it down to 2. Just makes this guy just that much more survivable. Especially how he's going to be buffing your army. And then we've got Deathly Invocation. At the start of your hero phase, pick up to 2 friendly summonable units within 6 inches of this model. You can heal D3 wounds that have been allocated to each unit you picked, roll separately for each unit. If no wounds are currently allocated to a unit you have picked, you may instead return a number of slain models to it that have a combined wound characteristic equal to or less than the roll of D3. So this is exactly the same as the other Wight King. I talked about. The reason I said it again was just this is such an important ability. This is how the centre of our Death Army works. It's so important to just keep repeating what Deathly Invocation does, just so you can understand just how important it is. So again, I think it's the joint weakest with the Necromancer, but still picking 2 different units, and you still bring out D3 models. If you've got 2 units of Graveguard, for example, you're bringing 2 D3 models back for them. So you're giving them back their banner essentially, just for this one guy. So that's pretty good. And there's command abilities. This is the same as before. So Lord of Bones. If this model uses this ability, pick a friendly Deathrattle unit within 18 inches of it. Until your next hero phase, add 1 to the attack characteristics of that unit's melee weapons. So again, this is good. I told you why it's good on the You give it to the Skeleton Warriors, now they're making 4 attacks each. You can make them make 5 attacks. Give it to the Graveguard, they're making 3 attacks each, and you can make them make 4 attacks. And then the Black Knights, they're making 3 attacks each, and then you can make them make 4 attacks. Especially how good for the Black Knights that would be on the charge. It's a really nice command ability if you're running a Deathrattle army. And especially with this guy being fairly more survivable than the other Wight King. If the enemy wants to just snipe him, they can snipe him with not too much difficulty. However, they are going to have to put a fair amount of resources into just killing him. And then, if we compare the Wight King, so the one with Black Axe, I said the reasons I prefer him. He's got a better ability with his axe, I prefer it. And then his armor's a lot better. His 4+ save, but it's better than a 3+ save because he halves all the damage done to him. And that's why I like him. The bonus what the other Wight King has, like I say, has a 3+ save, and he can also have a 12-inch movement, which I've talked about why movement is amazing in Age of Sigmar before. So making this guy be able to, triple his movement could be really useful, and it could make him late game be able to catch that one more objective that the enemy has, and then you get an extra point from it, and you've won the game. There are situations like that do happen. So situational, but that extra movement, could make him many times more better than the other Wight King with its only 4-inch movement. That is all the units for Deathrattle in the Legions of Nagash Battle Tome, because the Serpical Guard are not within the Battle Tome, which means they can't be taken as part of one of the Legions of Nagash. So a little bit sad there. However, I have got a box of them to make, but I don't think their rules in game were particularly that amazing anyway. So It's not a problem for me, but however, if you did really like them, you really wanted to use them in game, unfortunately you can't with the Legions of Nagash. So with that aside, let's look at the Deathrattle Battalion. So that is Death March. A relentless war of bone and ancient steel, the Death March follows its undead king into war, its crypt cursed blades and ancient spears ready to bring death to the races of the realms. So organisation, the Death March consists of the following units: 1 Wight King, 1 unit of Black Knights, 1 unit of Graveguard, and 3 units of Skeleton Warriors. Its abilities: Unbreaking Ranks. At the start of your hero phase, you can return a 1 slain model to each Death March unit that is within 9 inches of the battalion's Wight King. The next ability, March of the Dead. In your hero phase, the Wight King and all units from the Death March that are within 9 inches of him can make a move of up to 4 inches as if it was part of the movement phase. Models cannot run as part of this move. So, this battalion, it's not too hard to do. I mean, to be honest, 1 Wight King, it's not expensive. 1 unit of Black Knights, 1 unit of Graveguard, even if you wanted to make the minimum units, and then take 3 big blocks of Skeleton Warriors, isn't going to cost you too much. The abilities, being able to return a slain model, to your units is always good. They've got to be within 9 inches of the Wight King, however, but as you're bringing back so many models anyway, an extra one is just, will just annoy your opponent even more, I think is the best way to describe it. And then March of the Dead, to be able to make your guys move 4 inches in the hero phase if they're within 9 inches of that Wight King. Yeah, it's really good. I mean, it goes all the way from making Black Knights 12-inch movement to 16-inch movement, which makes them incredibly fast, to making Graveguard and Skeleton Warriors, which are, your slow units, and the Wight King himself only moving 4 inches. Now they're moving, 8 inches. So, I think that's pretty good, in all fairness. Big fan of that. Especially when you just need to quickly get to the objectives, and like with grave sites these days, movement is still very important, but being able to move really quickly early on, it's not as huge because you can summon your units near the grave sites, which will be near the objectives, so you can catch them turn 1 anyway. However, depending on the battle plan and depending on the situation, being able to move the extra 4 inches could be huge. And the battalion costs 110 points, so not too expensive either. It's a good battalion if you like your Deathrattle, however, I don't really see it being like an auto-take, shall we say. But you could build an army around it, sure. And I've came up with 2 2,000 point lists, came up with them quite quickly. So might not be the most competitive, but it's something I just quickly thought of, and I thought has got some use. And one of the lists I've just basically squeeze Death March into it just to try and show off that you can make an army out of it, and it can be somewhat good in the game. So we'll have a look at that now. So, like I said, this might not be the most competitive list, however, as I've talked a lot about the Deathrattle and I've just mentioned their battalion, I wanted to try and make an army around their battalion, just see what I could quickly come up with. So, we have an army here which has the Grand Host of Nagash Allegiance. It has only 3 heroes, but the first one is a Wight King with Black Axe. He's going to be your general. He's going to have the Lord Nagashizzar Commandery, which allows friendly Deathrattle units within 6 inches of him an extra attack. We're going to give him the Artefact, the Ossific Diadem, which gives Deathrattle units within 12 inches of him, or I think it's models within 12 inches of him, a 6-up Deathless save. Basically just gives him 2 Deathless saves. Which is good, especially how durable your Deathrattle is going to be. And then we have a Wight King with Baleful Tombblade. Now he's mounted on a Steed, and his artifact is the Baleful Lantern, which makes enemy units within 6 inches of him -1 to wound, and that's to wound in the shooting and combat phase. Well, I say it's shooting and combat phase. I mean, there's some things out there unless your enemy's attacking the hero phase. It essentially just makes your enemy -1 to wound, so just to be clear there. It also makes the enemy have to reroll successful casting rolls if they're within 6 inches of him, which can be good, especially if you're playing against magic heavy armies, and to be honest, death armies is going to be a good one this against. And making the enemy -1 to wound, there's quite a few abilities out there that trigger on a 6 to wound, so just making them -1 can really go, do a lot for you. One we just mentioned is Graveguard. If they get a 6 to wound, they do 2 damage a piece. However, with this, they're not getting 6 to wound anymore. So that's the White Kings. Now let's look at the Necromancer, which is the only wizard in this army, which is, to be honest, is the biggest caveat. But let's have a look at the spell he's got from the Law of the Deathmages, which is Spectral Grasp. So Spectral Grasp is cast in a of 6. If successfully cast, pick a terrain feature within 18 inches of the caster that is visible to them. Until your next hero phase, half the move characteristic rounding down of enemy units within 3 inches of any terrain feature affected by any Spectral Grasp spells at the start of their movement phase. Okay, so the reason I've gone for this is because being able to make your enemy's movement halved is huge, especially when you're not picking a unit, you're picking a terrain feature, and it could be, the perfect storm scenario where it's one in the middle of the board, a big one, and it's just making multiple enemy units half the movement characteristics. I mean, if I look at an army that I run a lot, which is Fleshy Courts, and a big flare army it is, and the flares have movement of 12, and I'm so used to that. It's part of my huge game plan when I take to tournaments. I'm just used to how fast the army is. Now, if they're movement 6, because their movement's been halved, that's a huge impact on the capabilities of my army. We look at other things. We look at if you fight against, dispossessed, let's say, the dwarves, and they've got 4-inch movement. Now with this, they've got 2-inch movement, or like Death Army skeletons, they've got 4-inch movement, and they've now only got a 2-inch movement. It is huge. Especially, it just stops them getting to objectives, and this is something your enemy's not going to expect you chucking at them straight away. So this is really good, and especially with the Locus of Shaiish ability, where if you cast this on a unmodified 9, you get to pick 2 terrain features, which is really, really, really good. Especially as within 3 inches of the terrain feature. So if it's like a Sylvaneth Wildwood, for example, means anything inside it, or anything within 3 inches of it, it's a big radius, it's going to be affected. And that brings me on to the other point, why I like this spell, is because if you fight against Sylvaneth and they cover the whole board with Sylvaneth Wildwoods, you can just go, okay, now your own forests are going to do bad things to you as well. So that's why I really like it. And Castlevania is 6, you're going to get this off most of the time. So big fan of that. So like I say, I only got 1 wizard in this army, and to be honest, he's going to be casting Van Hell's Dance Macabre pretty much all the time. However, if he's not going to cast that, and he doesn't want to cast Mystic Shield or Arcane Bolt, he's got the Spectral Grasp spell to cast. Like I say, it's probably going to be one of the last ones on his list he wants to cast, but you've got a tool in the back. Okay, so now we're going to move on to the units I've got. So for Battle Line, we've got the 30 Graveguard, which, it's not bad really at all. Like I said, with Graveguard, how I think of them now, you get so many of them more back. How many attacks they can have is insane. Now they're making 4 attacks each in this list, with the Lord of Nagashizzar command trait, and the Lord of Bones command ability from your White King General. These guys, like I say, making 4 attacks each just makes them horrendous, really. So that's why I really like them. A unit of 30, the reason I've gone for 30 might sound like a lot, and they're not all going to get combat because they've only got 1 inch range in their weapons, which is true. However, because they do benefit from the massed legions, or mass regiments ability, I believe it's called, which basically means if you take the max unit size, you get a discount. And with Graveguard, if you take 25 of them, it's going to cost you 400 points. But if you take the max unit, which is 30, it's going to cost you 420 points. So you're paying an extra 20 points for 5 Graveguard, which is just really good. Just really good discount that I just thought, why wouldn't you? So that's the reason I got for that, and just makes them more survivable as well. So that is the Graveguard, and of course they've got the White Blaze and Crypt shields just to make, like I say, a little bit more survivable as well with the shields. So next up we've got the 40 Skeleton Warriors. So with Ancient Spears, I've gone for them just so they get more range of their weapons, more attacks in, and these guys are making loads of attacks anyway. And the reason I've gone for 40 is because you've got to go with 40 skeletons just to make them durable, especially if you're going to put them on objectives and just to get the most attacks you can with them. 40 is good. And then, so that's the Skeleton Warriors. We all know what we're doing with them. They're making buckets of attacks, making the enemy have to make as many save rolls as possible. Next up, we've got 2 units of 10 skeletons. Now, this is for the battalion requirements. I know I say I always take units of 40 skeletons. However, these units are 10 skeletons, so I'm just going to use to screen my other units. And then next unit for the Deathrattle is the Black Knights. Now, I've got 10 here, just because I've ran 10 quite a few times before, and like I said, when I fought some bone splitters and they crashed into some arrow boys, you know, they did, I think they did 20 damage, like I said, in like one charge, you know, in the next round of combat, which was just huge, and just made a lot of the other orcs just run away. So I think they could be really good and really punchy. Then next up we have the Morghast Archai with the Hellbirds. Now the reason I've gone for them in this army is because it's a grand host of the Nagash army, which means they make an extra attack with their weapons, so now they're making 4 attacks each, hitting on a 3, wounded on a 3, -2 rend, 3 damage. It's really good, especially for a unit of 4 of these, which I've already tested out. It's not hard to get all 4 of them in combat. They have 2 inch range of their weapons. You're generally going to be attacking with all 4 of these at the same time. So yeah, 4 of those for me was just a no-brainer. I mean, you've got 440 points. It's a lot of points, especially for Morghast. And to be honest, I didn't really used to take them too much because, yeah, they were really good, but I just found there was better things to take in the army. However, now, as how death has changed with these legions, especially in the Grand Host where they get an extra attack, just makes them really worthwhile. And if I had Nagash leading the army, there would also be battle line. However, I haven't really tried anything like that out. I haven't used Nagash in the new battle tome, so I didn't really want to talk too much about it because I don't have the personal experience. So if I said to you, oh, it's really good because they become battle line, and they're really good because if they're battle line they do, you know, X, Y and Z, to be honest, I'd just be lying to you guys, and I don't really want to do that. So I just want to tell you from my you know, own truthful experience. So what I can say with the Morghast since the Legions of the Nagash battle tome came out is, like I said, you can get all 4 of them into combat if you have a unit of 4, and the sheer damage they can do is insane. So yeah, I mean, and to be honest, in the game I had, they were making 5 attacks each because I had a Vampire Lord as my general, whose command ability gave an extra attack, so 5 attacks each, with these guys making, you know, 4 of them, so you're making 20 attacks and 3 damage each, was just insane. So yeah, they're a big plus for me, I think, and especially how, as we've gone through the units now in this army, you're going to have all your Deathrattle holding the objectives, so when the enemy does eventually charge into your big blocks holding the objectives and try and wear them down to take the objectives, in your next turn then you can counter-charge with your Morghast Archai into the unit they've just used to charge into you, which you can bog their, you know, elite unit into combat with your, you know, Deathrattle, and then your Morghast Archai just come out and will just fairly confidently just take something off the board, because like with a unit of 4 making 4 attacks each, I mean, you know, that's 16 attacks all doing, you know, 3 damage, so what's that, 48 damage potential, which sure you're not going to get it all through, but you're going to get a lot of it through, especially on -2 rend. So yeah, they're definitely a good counter punch to the enemy, and that same be used for the Black Knights. You know, if you keep them back, wait for the enemy to charge your big blocks on the objectives, and then counter-charge with the Black Knights, get in there and get them to do the damage on your terms. So, and then after that we have the Death March Battalion, which we just talked about, is 110 points, and that takes us to a total of 2,000 points, with 0 allies and 149 wounds. Now, how I would use this army is I would, for the battalion, I'd make the Wight King on with a Baleful Tomb Blade on his Steed, the leader of the battalion. So it would be him, not your general, which would be the Wight King with Black Axe. And the reason why I'd make not your general the leader of the battalion is just to give your opponent more things to try and prioritise the snipe. If you just make one of your Wight King, you know, the best one, the enemy's just going to go, right, okay, easy decision, kill him first. Which most armies are capable of being able to just snipe out one of your characters. So make them have to think a bit more on who to snipe first. You know, could make them potentially just spread out all their damage, which, you know, wouldn't be a bad thing. You know, don't get me wrong, if you're playing against like a heavy Skyfire army, you know, all your 3 heroes are going to be dead potentially turn 1. But hopefully that won't happen. So anyway, back to my point. So I'd make the White King with Baleful Tombblade the leader of the battalion, put him on the horse, keep him your Black Knights. That means that the Black Knights are really fast and they're regenerating an auto 1 model in each one of your hero phases because they'll be next to the White King. And then you would also make your White King fairly more survivable in combat because the enemy units within 3 inches of him would be -1 to wound. I'm just going to double check because I said it was within 6 inches of him earlier and I don't want to tell you guys the wrong thing. So let's just have a look. Yep, so so I was right originally. So the enemies who are within 6 inches of this guy in the in any phase are -1 to their wound characteristics, so it just makes them that much more survivable in combat, which would make your Black Knights. And if you charge these guys into, if you manage to do a really good flanking move and charge them into an enemy shooting unit, now they're -1 to wound, and they're having to deal with all these Black Knights and the White King. So could be a very good flanking force there, especially how with the battalion he's bringing back 1 model. Now that would make that your Skeleton Warriors and your Grave Guard wouldn't make any uses of this battalion at all. However, as you know, to be honest, the battalion's major army, a 4-drop army, I believe, with this battalion. So it's helped you maybe get the first turn, as long as you're not obviously playing against like a 1-drop army or something, and that could help your your rest of your Deathrattle and the rest of your army get to those objectives turn 1 when they need to. So that's what I'd do with the Black Knights and the leader of the battalion for the White King. And then what I'd do with the other units is I would, let's say you're playing a battle plan where 2 objectives in the middle, 1 in your own territory and 1 in the enemy's territory. Let's say Battle for the Pass. So what I'd do is I'd have your block of 40 skeletons and your block of 30 skeletons and a unit of 10 skeletons all in the grave. Then what I'd do is I would put your grave sites on the objectives in the middle. So just put 2 on each of them, and then make your heroes move within 9 inches of them, and then set up your your 30 grave guard on one of them, not bang on the objective, but behind the objective. So there's a unit of 30 or more models. So it means they're 20. It means it's a unit of 20 or more models essentially. So you would also take that objective if you're within 6 inches of it in the Battle for the Pass. So you could bring them on pretty close to your own lines, but close enough to take the objective, just to make it harder for the enemy to get to them. As you've taken the turn 1, the enemy obviously get the next turn, so you don't really want them to be able to charge you on their turn and do so much damage, especially if you lose the next priority. So do that with a Grave Guard on one of them, and do the exact same with the skeletons, the unit of 40 skeletons on the other objective. So you split your heroes up, go one way, the other one go the other way. Put them within 9 inches of the gravesite. They can set up the block of 30 skeletons and the block of 40 grave guard. And then with that unit of 10 skeleton warriors that I told you about, it's also in the grave. Also set him up, set that unit of 10 up in front of the either the unit of grave guard or the unit of 40 skeleton warriors, depending on where you've got more heroes. So the reason I say do this is, say you put it in front of the unit of 30 grave guard. So that means if the enemy does charge you turn 1, or they get the priority and they charge you and they take the turns and they charge you in the second turn, they can only probably really charge the 10 skeleton warriors, and you've just slowed them down and basically made them take an extra turn to try and kill those grave guard, which is going to be really hard to do. Or if you just put the skeletons right in front of the grave guard, so the enemy unit charges them, yeah sure, they kill the skeletons, however they brought the grave guard into combat and now you get to counter punch with them, and 30 grave guard with taking no casualties and on full strength is pretty damn nasty. So that would be the idea as a use for that, and then keep your other 10 skeletons on your back objective, and then have your 4 Morgos Archai behind your lines, behind your skeletons or your grave guard. Don't just run them up the board and do as much damage as you can. Just keep them as a countermeasure to the enemy, whilst having your Black Knights and your White King doing some flanking. So I appreciate I don't have any pictures when I'm explaining this to you, so it might sound a little bit complicated, and hopefully I'm not overcomplicating this anymore. which, like I said, I hope I don't. But that's how I would use them. So, basically, your big blocks of units, don't set them on, don't set them up on the table. Depending on what battle plan you're playing. Like I say, this Battlefield class, maybe don't set them up on the table. Keep them in the grave. Don't put the grave site bang on the objectives in the middle. Put them just before it. But make sure that it's enough radius for you to be able to set up those units and still control those objectives. While keeping your unit of 10 on your back objective, your 10 skeleton warriors. Morghast in reserve, and Black Knights in reserve or doing flanking. That's how I'd use this sort of army. And like I say, I have had 3 games with Legions of Nagash since it came out. Well, I've had 3 games with the Grand Host of Nagash since the Battletomes came out. So it's quite a few, but I'm still learning. So this is just a tester thing that I've been trying to work with. So that's the idea for a army that's fitted around the Death March Battalion. However, you've only got 1 Necromancer and then 2 other heroes, so you haven't maximised your Deafening Invocation ability to be able to bring back as many models, and you can only cast 1 spell. So, like I say, this is not going to be the super competitive army, shall we say, in any way. But I just wanted to make a list just to show you guys. I talked about the battalion and just, in case you wanted to include it, see how it goes. Now looking at our second list, which again is another 2,000 point list and is under the Grand Host and the Nagash. This list is it's got a heavy Deathrattle presence. However, it's not like all based around the battalion. There's no battalion in this list, and it's not all about basically just making a whole army out of Deathrattle. It's a mixture, shall we say. So, starting off with our leaders. So our general is just a Vampire Lord. They're mounted on a Nightmare. She has the Lord of the Nagashizzar command trait, which is, the 6-inch radius, giving Deathrattle units within that range an extra attack. And then she has an artifact, Baleful Lantern, which was in the last list, so it basically just makes enemy units within 6 inches of her subtract 1 from wound rolls and have to reroll successful casting rolls. And then her spell is Law of the Vampires and it's Amorphime Orb. Now, this might not be the best spell to give her, as it's quite a hard one to get off. However, I think it could be really good fun. Now, the spell casts on a 7, and you draw an imaginary 1mm wide line from her, which is 12 inches long. And any units, friend or foe, under that line on a 4-up suffer d6 mortal wounds. So you might never get it off, because you've got to cast on a 7, which is 50-50. You'll fail, if you don't have any pluses to your casting. And then also there's the other thing about, even if you cast it, you have to roll a 4-up for an enemy. You might fail and it might just be a complete waste of time. However, it could be really good fun, because when I used it on Saturday, I did the Amorphime Orb and I cast it on a 12 unmodified. So what that meant is, because I got a 9 or more to cast, I triggered the Host of Shaiish ability, which allowed me to resolve the effect twice. So I tagged 2 enemy units in this, and I think one of them I got a 4-up twice for, and then the other one I got a 4-up once, and then I think they suffered about 12 mortal wounds in total or something. So yeah, like I said, that's the only time she did the spell in the game, but it really, really paid off. It was really good, devastating. So the reason we've got just a Vampire Lord as the general is because her command trait is pretty versatile. It allows you to pick a death unit within 15 inches, and then they make an extra attack with all their weapons. So that's why I like her. And also, because she's not going to be the biggest thing in this army, I want to spread as many targets out in this army as possible. So your enemy can't just go easy, oh, that's your general, is it? And it's your big scary monster, so that's just going to die now. By spreading out all your abilities on your different heroes, sure, that means that you have to have more synergy and movement and how close, radius things are to each other. But it makes the enemy's sniping job a lot harder. So, moving on to our next hero is going to be Arkan the Black, Mortarch of Sacrament. And then his Law of the Dead, the spell he chooses from it, is going to be Soul Harvest, which is from the Deathmages section. And this allows you to cast a spell on a 7, And then if you get it off, each enemy unit within 3 inches suffers D3 mortal wounds, so effectively like a 3-inch radius arcane bolt area, and around himself. And actually it's got quite a big base, there's quite a few things potentially, and each one of those units that suffers mortal wounds and that are not negated, you roll a dice for, for how many mortal wounds it caused, and on a 5-up you get to heal a wound you've previously taken. So bear in mind that Arcan the Black can heal 2 wounds at the end of a combat phase if he kills something. This is just an extra way for him to heal, and particularly how the Mort Archers, they are expensive in points, the models are, and yeah, they can do horrific things, but they are a bit squishy as they only have a 4-up save, and then even worse, they only have 11 wounds, which is really, really small. I don't know why they don't have 12, that generally annoys me a lot. However, as this is the case, the enemy can snipe them without too much difficulty, so being able to heal extra wounds just makes them so much more survivable, and the more survivable is, the longer he'll be on the battlefield, which means the longer he can benefit the rest of your army while damaging the enemy's army or debuffing them with spells. So yeah, he's a good addition to the army, and that's a good spell to choose one for him. And then the White King with Black Axe. So I've talked about what he does. He's got the Artefact, the Ossific Diadem, which gives your Deathrattle models within 12 inches of him a extra 6-up death save, essentially, so 6-up save against wounds and mortal wounds. So they're getting 2 death saves, which will make him really durable. And then after him we have 2 Necromancers. So the first one, his spell from the Lord of the Deathmages is the Spectral Grasp. That's what we talked about in the last video, essentially, picking terrain feature in 18 inches and enemy units within 3 inches of it, half the movement, which I've talked about so much how important it is to make sure you have good movability in your army. So being able to hamper your enemy's manoeuvrability by halving it is just going to help you out in so many ways. And then the next Necromancer has the spell from the Lord of the Deathmages, Fade and Vigour. Now the reason I really like this spell is because I believe it casts on a 6, only casts on a 6, and what you do is you pick an enemy unit within 18 inches of the caster, and that unit has to subtract 1 from their melee weapons to your next hero phase, and when I mean subtract 1, I mean to a minimum of 1. They can't be made so they don't do any attacks, that would just be a bit silly, so you can restrict it all the way down to 1 minimum. And then when they go to charge, they can only roll 1 dice, so that means that if they set themselves up, I don't know, 7 inches away to charge you, they've only got 1 dice, and if they don't have any pluses to their charging, they're not making it. So long charges are out of the question, and even short charges, like within 3 inches of the enemy. So you have to be like 3 inches away, for movement, and then so you set up 3 inches away from the enemy, as close as you can be to try and make a charge, and then you've got a third of the chance of them failing at even just 3 inches. So that is really quite good. Big fan of that, and it's again plus with the Spectral Grasp, it's just really making their movability really hard. So I'm a big fan of that. Now looking at the leaders, you can tell that there's a lot of magic there, and maybe I should have taken this in the Legion of Sacrament, as there's 4 wizards there, and one of them's Arcan the Black, and he's the Mortal Sacrament. Why not take his Legion for your allegiance? However, I personally just really like the Grand Host and the Nagash. I just really love having Graveguard as battle line. I mean, the effect of that might wear off at some point, but at the moment I'm absolutely loving it. So this is my list, and this is what I'm choosing to do. Now moving on to battle lines. So we're going to start off with our 40 skeleton warriors. Now they've got ancient spears, and I talked about them in the last list. You just set them up on the objective or near the objective, just make sure they're within range of it essentially, and make sure they hold out for as long as they can, essentially. So that's what they're there for, and also they can chuck a bucket load of attacks. However, don't rely on it, because I had a game on Saturday when I used them, and 40 skeletons attacked 10 liberators. I think I got 25 in range to attack, and bear in mind I actually had swords because I didn't have spears at the moment, so I had swords attacking them, so they were hitting on 3s, wounded on 4s, no rend, 1 damage. So what was that? I made him, because the champion was there as well, so I did 76 attacks, and he had to make 33 save rolls, and he took 1 wound because these liberators had a 3-up save re-rolling 1s. And to be fair, that's not as good save as they usually have, because they're usually made to have a 2-up save re-rolling 1s. So even with 3-up save re-rolling 1s, with my 76 attacks from these skeletons, did not kill a single liberator, as they only took 1 wound, which was really annoying. So don't rely on these attacks, but if you're not fighting Stormcast, you probably get quite a lot of damage from them, so fair play. And then we're going to move on to our Graveguard. So this is a unit of 30. I've talked for why a unit of 30 is really good, and the mass regiments bonus you're getting is just really, really, really cheap. You're paying to go from 25 to 30 Graveguard in 1 unit, you're paying an extra 20 points, which should just be abused, to be honest, because that's really, really good discount. And then, like I say, sit them on an objective, or when I say sit them on the objective, I think that's a wrong way to say it. Set them up towards your territory. They're coming out of a gravesite near the objective. Set them up as close to your side as you can, as far away from the enemy as possible, but make sure that it's at least 1 model within range of that objective, just because you've got a unit of 30 models here, so they're going to take precedent over the enemy units. So by setting them up further away from the enemy, it makes it harder for them to charge them, especially with the spells you've got on this list from your necromancers. So just being able to not get in combat for an extra turn or 2 can just make it really, really good for this unit, and just make it much more survivable, and allow it to countercharge the next turn if needed. And then for our 3rd battle line, we have 5 dire wolves. Now, essentially, the point of these is because we need 3 battle lines and 2,000 points, and they are really, really good for 60 points because they have 2 wounds apiece. They have a 5-up save, which is amazing for how cheap these guys are, and they have a 10-inch movement, and they're not particularly bad in combat. So I just stick these guys on my back objective, and they just sit out, and that's pretty much it. And like I said, they've got a 5-up save, so they can sort of survive in combat, particularly if they're getting a Deathless minion save somewhere. Then they've got a 5-up, 6-up, so not bad. They've got 2 attacks each, 4s and 4s, no rend, 1 damage, to standard. So very good unit for 60 points. And like I say, they're fast. They can, if you suddenly need them to get somewhere to help out with another objective, they can quickly do that, and that's why I like them. And then to finish off this list, we have our 4 Morghast Archai. Now, this is the same reasons why I've got them as in the last list. So you just, just keep them back, keep them reserved to deal with the situations when they become apparent, or for when you can foresee them come and make sure they're in place. Don't just charge them off into the enemy because they can do loads of damage. Keep them behind everything else, so the enemy will have to, charge one of your big blocks, and then these guys can counter-charge the next turn and do so much damage. So, that's the list. So the ideas behind it is why we've got so many heroes with so many different abilities. It's just to make the enemy have to pick their targets more wisely, rather than just going, oh, that's where all your stuff's stacked on, is it? We're just going to kill that. Because if you make Arcan the Black your general, to be honest, in this list, it might be better because it makes all your spell ranges a lot more. Adds an extra 6 inches to them, which is really good for each of them, especially the vampires and Fine Orb. However, if he's a general, it just makes that decision a bit more easier for your opponent to go, right, well, I'm going to kill him first. So, splitting them up just makes it harder for the enemy to target them. And then, so that's the Vampire Lord. She's given a lot of things. She's got that Blood Chalice to be able to heal that D6 wounds once per game. She's making the enemy -1 to wound. And so you keep her behind your blocks of skeletons and stuff, so she may be not in direct combat, but she's still affecting the enemy's combat. And then we have Arcan the Black, so basically he knows his Curse of Years, Arcane Bolt, Mystic Shield, and then he also knows the Fading Vigour, Spectral Grasp, and Amplify Orb, and Soul Harvest, if all those separate wizards that know those spells are within range of him. So, that's why he's there, so he can do loads of spells, and because he gets +2 to cast, it just makes it that much more reliable to get those spells off. and his Deafening Invocation ability is really, really good. It's pick 4 of your units within 18 inches of him, like 4 of your Sunball units to do the D3 to bring back models or to heal the models, and he gets a reroll D3. That's also why he's there. And he's 320 points, but isn't too expensive, so that's why I got him. And also another reason is because if you're playing Duality of Death, which is the battle plan where you go to capture an objective for your hero, he's a bit beefy, you know, he's got 11 wounds, he might be able to hold the objective for longer compared to the other heroes. And then why we've got the Wight King with Black Axe is because it's generally pretty tough with his armour, and you keep him behind your skeletons to give the extra attack. Or like I say your skeletons, I just mean your Deathrattle really, so you give your skeletons with Graveguard an extra attack, and to give them that extra 6-up save. That's exactly why he's there for. And you could think, well, why don't we just give that, you know, to a Necromancer? You know, you could save the 120 points and spend on something else. To be fair, you could do. Like I say, I only came up with this list quite quickly, so, you know, it's not going to be perfect. However, by just making so many targets for your enemy, you just, you know, give them a bit of a headache of what to go for. And then that's also the same reason why we have 2 Necromancers, for the extra spell power, but also for your enemy to have to go, right, okay, so one of them is going to, like, make the Graveguard piling attack twice and make them do horrific damage. So just quickly kill the Necromancer. It's only got 6-up save. However, they've got 2 to kill, so it's just going to take them that a little bit longer. And if they're killing the Necromancers, they're not worrying about Arcane the Black, your Morghast, or your Graveguard, so, or your Skeleton Warriors. So they're the distraction really, and their spells are pretty good. So that's for both the Necromancers. The 40 Skeletons sit on the objective for as long as they can. The 30 Graveguard sit on the objective as long as they can, and you can make them have 4 attacks in this list, and they will just wipe out the enemy. And the enemy, unless they played against the new Death or they've got Death themselves, they're not gonna really understand just how powerful Graveguard are now, and they're definitely going to underestimate them, especially the first time they fight them. So that's why they're there. And then the 4 Morghast Archai, they're also there as a bit of distraction, so they could be a huge sledgehammer for your army just to wipe out enemy units. But they're also there as a distraction for your Graveguard. Your enemy's going to see your 4 Morghast Archai and go, right, okay, they're the guys I need to kill. They're the ones that are going to, you know, be the most threat to me potentially. However, the 30 Graveguard can potentially do a lot more damage, so that's why they're there. And then the 5 Direwolves, like I say, a fantastic cheap unit just to keep your back objective or to support where they need to with their, you know, amount of models. So looking at the list, it's got, what have we got? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 drops, which is a lot. You're probably not going first. However, not being able to go first is not always terrible. You know, if you can plan to not be able to choose who gets to take the first turn, like if you can get enough practice with your army to go, right, okay, what's it like when I have to go first because the enemy's told me I have to go first, or what's it like when the enemy makes me, you know, have to go second? How can I plan for that? So if you can plan for that eventuality, you should be able to handle it all right. Rather than if you've got like a 4-drop army, you can go, oh, it's a lot of the time it's going to be 50-50 if I go first. So it's quite hard to, you know, if basically it's going to be 50-50 if you can deploy first. It's going to be quite hard for you to plan for, you know, like 3 potential outcomes. However, if you just plan, you're never going to be able to deploy first. Can just give you that much more awareness of how you've got to perform with your army under pressure. And then another point with the Direwolves is that if you summon like your block of 40 skeletons just in range of the middle objective but very close to your own territory, so it's hard for the enemy to charge them, also summon your Direwolves from that gravesite as well. That would be on that objective, just to basically scream your unit of 40 skeletons with 30 Graveguard, just to make your enemy have to spend that extra time trying to charge into the Direwolves, kill them on turn, and then have to wait another turn to be able to charge into your unit holding the objective. Could just make them that much more useful. And that idea is the same in the last list what I was saying about the Skeleton Warriors. Use them as a, you know, a roadblock before the enemy can get to your big units holding those objectives. And that is pretty much it. So like I say, these lists are just something I came up with quickly. So if you want to point out in the comments, you know, better ways to build them stuff, I'd be more than happy to hear it. But just so you know, like I said, I try to, you know, knock up some quickly. I mean, I'm not saying in a tournament these lists could, like, be really good, but I think, in your local store and stuff, they could be, if nothing else, they could be a lot of fun. I do want to try out a list with Nagash at some point. I am actually painting him at the moment. I'll be using him at the weekend, so that'll be good fun. But as I had quite a few games now with Deathrattle, like I said, I haven't had loads. There's still loads of things I'm learning. I just wanted to tell you my first thoughts of what I think they're like in the Legions of Nagash after playing a few games, just to get my opinions out there and to really start the conversation going. Tell me what you guys think as well, just so we know, as we can learn together how to play Death in the future. I mean, I had a game on Thursday with I took the Legion of the Night for the first time. It was a 1500 point game. Admittedly, I didn't take too much Deathrattle. I still took like 60 skeletons, but that's not too many realistically. I took that, and in that game I had 1500 points. I had a Vampire Lord and Zombie Dragon. I had a Tomb Banshee. I had a Vampire Lord. I had a unit of 40 skeletons, 2 units of 10 skeletons. What else was it? 2 Bat Swarms, and then a Terrorgeist. I think that's all I had in the army. But I won the game by the end of turn 2 because my opponent says I was really lucky and Death is broken. The amount of times he whined about Death is like absolutely annoyed me, because it's like, oh, well, how... With the Legion of the Night, he was annoyed that, you can set up units in reserve and all that and bring them on, all that sort of thing. And it's overpowered, and Death is broken now. I tell you what, it just made me so fed up that the amount of people I've told that I beat this guy within 5 minutes is, it's loads now. I wasn't going to brag about it, but after this guy has been basically a whiny little bitch, I just really had to, because Death isn't broken. Death in general has had to sit since Age of Sigmar started for ages of not being able to be super competitive or anything. We've had to sit there and take all this shit from the Stormcast, and then more recently from Zeech and Blazicorn and things like that. Now finally it's our turn to maybe not be tournament winning, but to maybe stand a chance, because I think Steph won one tournament, like one major tournament. I think was it Heat 2 for the Grand Tournament in Age of Sigmar at Warhammer World last year. I think it won one in the Gash list. And to be fair, the General must have been really, really good in that army, because I don't really know how it could have beaten most of the other stuff at the time. So, yeah, sorry about that, just bringing that up, but I just wanted to say that if you've got anyone in your local store who's whining like a little bitch about Death being broken, just beat them again, because the person I was fighting, he's got a Stormcast army, and the army I was fighting on that day had those Eagle Bolt Throwers from the High Elves. So basically, when they get a 6 to hit, they do 2 mortal wounds, and he had 2 of them in his army, and he also had the Lord Ordinator. So as he was the general and stuff, he made them get +1 to hit, so they were doing 2 mortal wounds on a 5 up to hit, and then one of them got to shot twice, and it was just ridiculous. So the point that I managed to beat him, and he still complained about it, just shows you they're not the sort of people you want to fight against. So that's a little bit of a rant there. Sorry about that. Sure to share that experience, but I just wanted to show you how devastating we can be now with these new, with the new book and with the new allegiance abilities and the spells and things like that. It just gives us so many more tools in the toolbox. There's so many different ways to build death armies now. Generally, really excited. So anyway, with all that sort of rounding aside, and I know in this video I've talked about lots of different ways about these lists, and maybe over-explained a couple of things, but I just really wanted to get out my thoughts, like I said. And like I said, this video's gone on for a little bit longer than I would like to, but I just wanted to explain everything to you and how I'm thinking of Death at the moment, particularly with the Deathrattle. So yeah, that's pretty much it, and I've got a video planned for the weekend, be a bit special. I'll tell you closer to the time. But in the meantime, if you've got any ideas for videos for this week, please let me know down in the comments. I was thinking about doing a couple of lore ones, but if you've got a suggestion or two you would like me to cover, I'll be more than happy to hear. So, as always, guys, if you've enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe and comment down below, so that does always help me produce as much video content as I can. And I thank you very much for watching, and until next time, remember, Nagash is all, and all is one in Nagash.